greatest moral example to Muslims, to the Ummah?
Yes.
Okay. So, do you accept that Muhammad, according to tradition, he had sex with Aisha when she was 9 years old?
So from what I've been told, let's see, I'm just thinking of
So from my research into this, because this has been something that has always quite sort of astounded me, to be honest with you, because I can't accept that even an average person could do such a thing and be considered an average person, really. But to be told that they are the greatest moral example, to me that seems like bizarre. Like I could never really accept that. I mean, I could like. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the way that I would.
Hey, good to see you, my friend.
So what I think is, obviously, Muslims look at Aisha as being an exceptional woman.
At that age.
So we generally believe that she would have started menstruating much earlier than most girls. So by 9, she would have already been
menstruating.
Yes.
She would have started a menstrual cycle.
That's right.
Can I talk a little bit about this? So we actually know that in the modern day, girls reach their menstrual cycle way quicker than they ever did before. And the reason why, from a scientific point of view, is actually nutrition. We have much better tradition now. It's the same reason why they're so tall so early. It's because we have so much great nutrition that we just didn't have before. And if you listen to what experts think about this, when you go back to the Middle Ages and before, you look at when they would. You look at when girls would have started their menstrual cycle. It wouldn't have been till about 14 or 16 between there. So Aisha would have had to have been even more exceptional because the average girl would have started her menstrual cycle way later. It's also worth pointing out that it would have been overwhelmingly more likely she would have started puberty at 9. That's more acceptable and believable. But menstruating and puberty are different. It wouldn't have been until a few years into puberty that she would have started menstruating.
Well, this is, as I said, he doesn't specifically say that, I think, in the Islamic text. This is just what people have supposed. One thing I would say is that child marriage was common universally. So even in Britain, it was common until, from what I've heard, until the 19th century.
Absolutely.
And it was actually within statutes.
Yeah, absolutely. But you see, the thing is, what this is always going to come back to is that I don't have, as my greatest moral example, anyone in the past. Not the queens, not the kings, no one. The only one for me is Jesus. And Jesus never did anything like that. But for you, it's Muhammad. Yeah.
We don't know, for example, what age Mary was when she gave birth to Jesus. She could have been as young as Aisha was when she got married to Muhammad. We don't know.
Okay, I'll give you the agnostic view that we don't know. But my point is that nothing says that she was that age, and nothing gives us the view that John was as old as 54, for example. So my point is that because we know this from the Sahih al-Bukhari, from Sahih Muslim, from this hadith that is authentic, we have to wrestle with this question. And it gets even more complicated because for some reason, according to, I think it's Sahih Muslim, Aisha was playing with dolls at a much later age, which is odd. In fact, if you actually try and calculate what age she would have been at the time, because it comes after Muhammad come back from Khaybar, after his victory in Khaybar, she probably would have been about 14, but she was still playing with dolls. A winged horse, the hadith calls. And that's difficult because we don't know how do you reconcile that. Because on the one hand, she was apparently menstruating and having sex with Muhammad at the age of 9. Well, according to hadith, multiple hadiths, by the way.
Well, no, the bit about the menstruation, that's not in the hadith.
Well, be careful because Muslims will try and tell you that in Sayyid ibn, forgive me, I've got the name of the hadith, but one of the 6 authentic hadiths, there's a phrase that supposedly says she was menstruating, but it's not true. If you look at the Arabic, it actually says that she breathed, not she menstruated. She breathed? Yeah, it's a weird thing. But I've heard Muslims in the past.
people breathe.
Yeah, it's related to the fact that she did something because she was out of breath, basically. But in this particular, Sayyid ibn, I can't remember the name of it, he might come to me later. But you're right. Other than that one, which I don't think is legitimate, there are no references to her menstruating, which is challenging. And I don't, you see, if I look at it from a non-Muslim perspective, and I think of a normal person who's 54 years old, who chooses to have sex with a 9-year-old, if you told me that was justified, I couldn't believe you. If you told me that was the greatest moral example to mankind, I would say, man, you know, you're crazy in all honesty. I can't justify
So
that.
yeah, what I would say is, obviously with this kind of subject, we're getting into things like child marriage, things like paedophilia, things like consent, age of consent. Obviously, she was very young. There's all these issues revolving around this. So what I would say is, when we say that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the greatest example, he's an example to us in relation to those things, because what I would say to you is a lot of those issues are sort of modern day issues, like the concept of paedophilia is a modern day concept, the concept of child marriage. I explained to you that children used to be engaged and often married at a young age. Yeah, exactly. But you notice the marriage was only consummated after she'd started menstruating, after she'd reached the age of
well, we don't know that for sure.
Okay.
I know it's something that Muslims like to think, but it's problematic anyway, because menstruation is not a sign of reaching maturity. It's a sign that you're beginning your stages to maturity. For example, scientifically speaking, we know that...
Do you accept that a woman can have a child before she started menstruating?
It's very unlikely.
Yeah, but that's what it means. It means that the egg is being
but here's an interesting thing, it's what I'm getting into.
Yeah.
According to scientists now, 80% of monthly cycles that women go through, as soon as they hit menstruation, don't actually ovulate.
What, for adult women?
No, as soon as a woman menstruates, no matter what age she is, for the first year, 80% of those cycles don't result in ovulation. There's no egg. So you see that this isn't a clear sign of maturity. In fact, it seems as if you're only beginning the stages. It takes another 3 years at least for you to start to have the majority of your cycles actually be fertile, and actually be able to give rise to a child.
Okay, fair enough. But my point was that people in the past were engaged and married at a young age anyway. So.
Right, but I don't think 9 probably would have been normal.
Well, no,
according to science again, most women wouldn't have even been capable at the age of 9.
Well, no, so what I've told you was it was a universal practice. Even in this country, girls were being married at 9 years old in the past.
Well, I think it's more likely it was more like 12. We know from sources it's more like 12 or 13.
Yeah.
It's not really 9. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that didn't happen.
Well,
I'm sure it did.
It's in statute law. You can look this up.
Sure, yeah.
Don't take my word.
I'm talking about what people actually did. As in, what was the norm? And I grant you that yes, marriage at a young age and consummation at 12, 13 was something that happened in society. But what I'm saying is though, is that there's a big difference between 9 and 12 and 13. There is a huge gap there, like in terms of child development.
Yeah, I mean, look, now we're sort of just arguing about figures, essentially. And what was the next question you wanted to ask me?
Okay, sure. So, are you aware that in Islam, if you leave Islam, there is a death penalty for leaving?
Yes, I'm aware.
What do you think about that?
So I think when it comes to capital punishment, I support capital punishment generally. I think that with the death penalty for apostasy, it's related to someone who leaves their religion and then leaves Islam and sort of propagates sort of anti-Islam rhetoric and that sort of thing. I think it's a good safeguard to have in place. I think if you look at the death penalty, it was used by the church, for example, in relation to heretics during the Inquisition. So it's not nothing unique. Again, it's nothing unique to Islam. It's actually was practiced within Christianity.
Can you tell me a religion that had as part of its scriptural basis this doctrine?
Well, I think perhaps Islam might be unique in that respect.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
I don't know if any of this.
Yeah.
But to me it seems bizarre, right? So I have friends who are ex-Muslim, yeah? They don't go to the mosque anymore, the masjid, they don't have anything to do with that.
Okay.
But the thing is that...
By the way, not going to the mosque doesn't automatically
Right, I know. But the thing is that they also probably would say negative things about Islam. If I ask them what is your view on Islam, they would say, I don't think Islam is the truth, I don't think Muhammad was the prophet, here's the reasons why. Yeah?
Okay.
Is that, according to you, enough to warrant causing mischief in the land and enough to warrant the death penalty in Islam to that person?
Okay, well, I'm not an Islamic scholar or an Islamic judge, so I wouldn't be able to
Okay, just so you know though,
Yeah.
the four Islamic jurisprudence of law would agree that yes, that is worthy of the death penalty. They would argue about how long you have to give, and some would say you have to give a few days, some would say a week, etc., etc. But they ultimately agree, yes, that it should apply.
And so, do you consider, as you put it, as it's spread in the Quran, spreading mischief, spreading corruption in the land? I mean, do you not think that's immoral and that warrants a penalty?
But immoral according to who? So for example, would you say it's immoral to say bad things about Christianity?
Yes, it is.
You would?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Well, the Quran itself says bad things about Christianity, from my point of view, right?
So there are things that the three Abrahamic faiths and all faiths in general have in common. I would say that, you know, moral law and moral doctrines are part of it. Obviously the bits where Islam and Christianity disagree, they're relatively minor points in relation to the Trinity, in relation to the crucifixion of Jesus. So I would say apart from those
I disagree with that. I would say there's actually quite a lot.
Okay, such as?
Well, we disagree on the authority of Scripture for one thing. So, for example, in Islam, you think that Scripture comes from eternal tablets, yeah? You think it's been, in some sense, perfectly preserved and that Allah guards His word. Well, we don't have the same sense of Scripture being eternal in Jannah that somehow is co-equal with God. We don't have that view.
Well, I think the Torah was given by God on Mount Sinai to
Yeah, but we don't
Moses,
believe it was an eternal, uncreated tablet.
Okay.
In the sense that we don't think that there is another God. Because if you have an eternal, uncreated thing, then ultimately you've associated something with God. Yeah?
Okay.
So if you say there's an eternal, uncreated tablet, you're saying there's two gods now. You're saying Allah's a god, and you're saying the tablet is a god.
Now you're trying to put words in my mouth.
Okay, well, this is an argument, yeah, but I'm aware that this is what Muslims believe. So I want to make you aware that there is, according to Islam, there is uncreated eternal tablets, yeah, that have Kalam Allah, Allah's word on them, and because they are uncreated, I would argue that means that they are outside of creation, and therefore they are like God.
Well, obviously I wouldn't agree with that. You know, I believe in Allah, the one God. So I mean, moral law. I mean, it is eternal in that sense.
I wondered who you were then. I was like, who's this guy? Sorry.
Yeah, it is. It's eternal in that sense.
Right.
So yeah, it's
Eternal in
not
that
a god. You know.
Do you believe? I was going to say perfect preservation. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah, we
were talking about that. Yeah, sorry. I was wondering if that was with you or was with someone else.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Well, that's interesting. To me, though, I don't see how Muhammad could be a perfect example.
Okay, why not? I mean, we've raised.
Okay. So
some,
first of all, Muhammad himself had people killed. Yeah.
right?
So I think a prophet having people killed, particularly in the context of them criticizing him. So he had people who wrote poems about him. There's even a hadith that talks about a woman who said bad things about him. She did poetry. He ordered her to be killed. I don't think that's good. I don't think that's what the greatest moral example does.
Well, there were Old Testament prophets who had people killed. Moses had people killed.
Absolutely, but I don't think those Old Testament prophets are the greatest moral example. I think Jesus is, and Jesus didn't have people killed. Yeah.
Well, we've reached. That's an interesting point you raise. So in Islam, we believe in all the prophets from Adam through to Jesus and Muhammad. Now, as a Muslim, I would say, you know, one prophet is, worse than another prophet because of X, Y, Z. Obviously, we say Muhammad was the last and final and greatest prophet, but we look back at all the prophets and we don't sort of nitpick. Well, did he kill people?
Do you not see how Jesus, or in your version Isa, is such a clear moral superior to Muhammad? I don't see how that could even be argued.
Okay.
Because I mean, like according to the Quran, Isa was sinless, yeah? I mean, I know you believe all the prophets were sinless, but Isa was sinless. We believe that as well. Isa, he created clay birds and he breathed life into them. He defended Maryam from an early age from the crib. He did all these miracles, but Muhammad is not recorded as doing any miracles in the Quran. I know that apparently he split the moon, but I mean, there are problems with that, I think.
And we believe the Quran is a miracle, by the way, so...
But why is the Quran a miracle? There are so many problems. Remember we talked earlier about the preservation of the Quran. I don't think think the preservation of the Quran is clear. I think it's very much obviously wasn't perfectly preserved.
The preservation is a miracle, because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he said he will preserve it, that is a miracle. When your book
Right,
was
but it wasn't preserved though, right?
Different versions of the Quran. Abdullah ibn Masud had his own Quranic codex.
No.
Yes,
Our criteria is first of all is coming from memorizing. This is the first criteria.
Right.
Listen, and let's turn back to the miracles. Okay, not
you just came in and you just talked about the perfect preservation. So what I'm saying is that Muhammad said there are 4 people you can learn the Quran from. One of them was Abdullah ibn Masud.
Did he talk to you about miracles? Yes or no?
I haven't talked to you. Well, we were going on to it. But you just came in, and I'm now addressing you because you just came in.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that the Quran has not been perfectly preserved because the 2 other companions that Muhammad said that you should learn the Quran from said there were different Qurans with different surahs.
You know, when even the differences, what you call them differences, who they are not, if they come in from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam,
Came from the Prophet Muhammad,
if they come in from the same source, that means is that when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam he said to you, the Quran is come down in 7 letters, okay? Where is the problem there?
The problem is that there are parts of it that are now lost. Ubay ibn Ka'b had 116 surahs. The current Quran only has 114. You've lost some of it.
No, that is a lie.
That's a lie.
Yes,
So your
that's
traditions
a lie.
don't say Ubay ibn Ka'b was.
That's what the Shia say.
That's what the Shia say. Ubay ibn Ka'b was trusted by Muhammad as one of the 4 reciters of the Quran that people should learn the Quran from.
He said he's a reciter. He's not a writer.
He had his own codex. He had it written down. There was
He can write,
that was
look,
destroyed
each one he can
before-
write what piece he wants to write.
Uthman had it destroyed.
What verses? Everyone he can write what verses he wants to write.
Right, but he was considered an authoritative figure
Now-
according to Muhammad.
Now, yeah, there are too many. They were
Too many?
Yes.
Right, so
According
even
to
though
the
that
Prophet
he was
Muhammad,
one of the
they were
best reciters of the
Now, why you
Quran,
want to
his
run
version
the
didn't come
topic?
into the
Why you running
Quran.
from the topic? Why you running
Well, then that's
from
what
the
you
topic?
talked about. You talked about. You
No.
asked me about it, so
Okay.
I'm asking you. Yeah.
Okay.
I talked to you about it before. I know that, but he's now asking me.
Okay. You want to talk about, or you want to talk about preservation about Quran?
We could talk about preservation of Quran if you want to talk
and
about that.
Bible.
Yeah, all right.
the-
All right. Let's do a
and the
comparison.
Bible.
Let's do a comparison. Let's
Yes.
compare how the Quran was preserved and how the Bible was
Yes.
preserved. Let's compare them. Yeah.
First,
Yeah. Go on then. Here we
First,
go.
give
I'll let you go.
me a link. Okay. First, give
Right.
me.
Take care, mate.
First, give me a link. First, give me a link
I think
between. Yes, link between.
Oh, right. Not a web link. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
Give me a link between the Old Testament you have today and Moses, and give me the link between the New Testament you have today and Jesus. Go ahead.
All right, I'll start with the New Testament and Jesus because that's the one that's, I think, most easily is proven. And the reason why is because the New Testament was written a lot later than the Old Testament. By the time that the New Testament came about, we had multiple people who gave independent attestation to the Gospels. So we have
just asked you
we have the synoptic Gospels, which is one source, and we have the John-based Gospel, which is another source.
Yeah.
Both of these collaborate with each other and they confirm each other. We know that John is the beloved disciple of Jesus, and we know that he was a first-hand witness to what Jesus preached. We know that, for example, the Gospel of Mark got his information from Peter. Peter was a disciple and apostle of Jesus.
Give me where Mark approved for Mark. He said, I get it from Peter. And Mark, he wasn't eyewitness to Jesus. He get it
We
from
have
Peter.
earliest traditions that say that Mark got it from Peter. We also know,
Give me a proof of that. Give me a proof of that. Give me a manuscript where Mark he stating, I get it from Peter.
from early church fathers.
Give me a proof when Mark. I'm not.
It would be the manuscripts of the early church fathers
give me-
that talk about that as a...
I'm asking you. Give me a proof when Mark he said, I get it from Peter.
It is a tradition that is preserved from the early church fathers, which is why you don't find it...
I'm not asking you about tradition. I'm asking you a proof where Mark he said, I get it from Peter.
I already told you, you won't
don't
find it
have a
in
single
Mark
proof.
as a thing, but you
will
will
not have
find
a
it in the
single
early
proof.
church
You will not
fathers.
have a single proof. You not have a single link between Jesus and the gospel who you have today, and you not have a single proof.
Okay, here we go.
You not have listen. You don't have a single proof that the Old Testament who you have today is come from Moses. If you have, then show me proof to me, please.
Okay, do you know how manuscripts are preserved? Do you know how that process works?
I'm asking a question.
Okay,
You
all right,
ask
let
a
me give you
question.
a little rough down on
Give
this.
me
then.
link.
So we have papyrus, yeah, which is dried leaves that are interlaced with each other. Papyrus degrades over a few years. So in other words, when you copy something down, like scripture, you have effectively a time limit until that papyrus breaks down. So that explains why we wouldn't expect to have manuscripts prior to the New Testament. And even the New Testament, the only ones that we have come from the 2nd
I
century.
didn't ask you that.
I'm
Here is
explaining
between-
why in the Old
Look,
Testament
you
we
have
would not be
none-
able to
you
have
none-
manuscripts
you
from
have
that period.
You have non-single manuscript that from first century. None.
We have manuscripts from the early 2nd century that, in order for them to have existed, they're literally the
How
size
long?
of tablets. They would have.
Exactly.
Listen,
Is
wait,
that
wait.
more like a
Yeah,
card, no?
let me finish
A
this.
piece. Where is the rest?
Let me explain.
Plus-
I already
plus-
wait. Let me
plus-
finish. You asked me a
plus
question.
is
You asked me a question.
150 years after Jesus. There is no
That's
link.
not 150 years after
Yes,
Jesus.
it's 150.
No. First of
It's
all,
150.
when did Jesus die?
Okay,
When did
go
Jesus?
ahead.
When did Jesus
Go
die?
ahead. Go ahead.
When did Jesus die?
When Jesus died.
33 AD.
Yes.
Yes, most people say 33 AD. So we have manuscripts from the early 2nd century that are the size of a credit card, yeah? But what you don't understand is,
Second, when?
can I just explain this to you?
When? No, I didn't hear the date.
So early 2nd century. So you're talking like
early
110,
2nd century.
120 AD, yeah?
100. Is
Yeah.
that?
Now, when we have
Where
those
is the
manuscripts,
link then?
What-
Where
let me
is the
explain.
link?
Let me explain
Where
to
is
you.
the link
Let
between
me
that
explain it to you.
And Jesus.
Listen,
And you are-
my friend. You
small
have to let
piece.
me answer. You have to actually let me answer.
A small piece, like
No,
the-
yes,
the
a small
size of a
piece, yes.
card.
But where does it come from? This is a copy, yes? That's not the original. So if it was a copy,
Yes.
that means that the original manuscripts would have come decades before that. So
Where
that's
is
why
it?
we put them
Where
to
is the
the
link?
1st
Where is the
century.
link?
Now, that is for the later one.
Yeah, I have to put my camera to Lamin.
Let's talk about where the earliest church records we have. The earliest church records we have come from Paul, yes? Paul was writing 1 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians. These are the earliest letters we have that are dated in about 20 years.
I'm asking about the gospel.
But Paul wrote about things that are included in the gospel. We actually can find quotes from Jesus that are recorded by Paul in his letters.
That is not true. That is
Why are you going away?
I'm a cameraman. You know me. I'm a cameraman here. I have to put my camera.
You asked me a question. Wow.
Wrap up.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
First guy.
Well,
But there is no link.
there is a link. I was telling you and explaining you to it, and you went off.
That is not.
Ah.
I have to put my camera. I have to put
All right, sure, yeah. Okay, so just first of all, just that conversation that we had, it started with a nice chat with a Muslim who has recently become a Muslim, unfortunately. And we were talking about how the Quran hasn't been perfectly preserved, how Ubay ibn Ka'b, how Abdullah ibn Masud were two of the companions that were trusted to recite the Quran, and how they had totally different versions of what we have today. That's clear evidence that the Quran hasn't been perfectly preserved. This chat that I just had with this Muslim gentleman, he effectively ran away. I started to explain how papyrus, how it grades over time. That's the reason why you can't expect there to be manuscript evidence of direct copies of the gospel, because unfortunately papyrus grades. I was going to talk about the early church, but he's run off, and that was sort of it. So talking a little bit about presentism, an interesting point. Muslims will tell you ad infinitum that they believe in objective morality, that they believe that there is one God, Allah, and He is the source of all objective morality and objective truth. But when you talk about inconvenient moral truths, like for example, the very edgy case of Muhammad having sex with a 9-year-old, they will switch the argument and they'll start talking about how, well, in their culture that was acceptable, therefore it's okay. But remember, that's a subjective argument. They switch. They switch from an objective argument to a subjective one. They can't have both. Only one has to be true.